And hi everyone, my name is Ritvik and I lead data and analytics at Chain Reaction, a media agency based in Dubai. Today we are going to be discussing all things about GTM, and before I get into details, right here, okay, perfect. If I can remove this here as well, okay. We are just going to look into what GTM is, a top-level overview. I believe those who presented before me already gave a comprehensive overview about Google Tag Manager. We will dive into the specific focus of this session, an intro to GTM hacks, and we'll learn what those are and what values those could bring. And finally, we will have a look into a few demos and see how things work and what kind of challenges could be solved and potential use cases and impacts that we would have from such approaches. Okay, a bit about me before we dive deep into it. My name is Ritvik, of course, and I like to travel. Recently, I went to the northernmost whiskey distillery up in Norway, where the temperature was around -20. I really enjoyed the vibe there. Apart from seeing the world around different countries, I have been involved in numerous data and analytics projects revolving around GA4 implementation recently, but not just GA4 implementation, also supporting and consulting clients with their digital and analytics infrastructure that includes setting up the right tools, technologies from a front-end architecture perspective on the websites and apps, as well as back-end architecture perspective on how, for example, the cloud infrastructure could look like. So I try to focus on different areas of the digital journey or touch points that the customer might have to deal with or the clients might have to work or consider at some point. So I try to work on the entire spectrum. I am also an organizer of Major Camp Dubai. This is, we recently organized the first ever unconference event in September here in Dubai. We plan to organize one more next year, probably around the same time in September or so. The date haven't been decided. And potentially we will also bring it to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia as well next year. And of course, like the rest of us, I enjoy keeping myself up to date and learning new things. With that aside, let's dive into Google Tag Manager. What is Google Tag Manager? I don't think it needs an introduction, but there may be a few new folks joining in. So I would just give a quick summary that it's a powerful tool designed to manage and deploy code level changes primarily on websites. You also have a version of Google Tag Manager for mobile apps, which we will not discuss in this session. And you also have a version of server-side tag management, which is also out of the scope of this session because we are going to focus mostly on front-end related updates through Google Tag Manager. We all know it's easy to use. Typically, back in the days, you would have to request some changes to the IT teams or the tech and development guys to implement any kind of advertising pixel. And they would, if they were not using a proper content management system in place, they might miss introducing or adding some scripts on certain pages. It was a hassle to follow up and chase whether something was done or not. With Google Tag Manager, the process is much quicker. Anyone can implement or add code snippets onto your website without having to go through a technical IT related involvement or process. It's very functional, versatile in nature. You can, of course, enable your entire digital marketing stack through Google Tag Manager by enabling pixels like Google Analytics, ads, and so on. Interesting fact is that, of course, the updates you make on Google Tag Manager reflect on your website in almost real time. That means you don't have to wait for your changes to take effect in a day or so, and you can quickly start to see the impact and results of whatever changes you deployed or made through Google Tag Manager. Digital marketing is, of course, not the same. Now it's much easier to implement, change, or capture any relevant data points you may need to make informed decision about your marketing strategy without having to go through any technical or IT-related hurdles on the way. And one important benefit I find quite useful is the version control capability of Google Tag Manager. Initially, when Google Tag Manager was new to me back in 2015, I was at times afraid to deploy new tags or changes, thinking that I might break something on the website. But eventually, version control was always to the rescue, and so that you don't have to be fearful about breaking things, as long as you can identify something is wrong and you're able to revert back on the previous version fairly quickly. So that's Google Tag Manager in my opinion in a nutshell. Today, we will focus on two aspects of it. One is called real-time updates, basically whatever changes you deploy or inject as form of code snippets will be reflected on the websites in almost real time. We will exploit this capability of Google Tag Manager, which is meant for implementing marketing related use cases, pixels, analytics, things like this. But we will utilize its capability to inject whatever code snippets we want into any website and potentially make some changes which would have taken IT departments or tech infrastructure team members to several days or hours to implement minor changes. They may have to deal with long deployment related lifecycle stage, user acceptance testing, and then deploying. And the whole process might take hours to days, depending on how your tech infrastructure and team works. Cutting down this deployment cycle from hours or days into potentially minutes, depending on what you're trying to achieve, is a game changer, especially when you're working with a brand that spends quite heavily and you notice that something isn't working or something could be improved. You could deploy those changes fairly fast and quickly through Google Tag Manager, and we'll see how in just a moment. This deployment and the ability to inject anything on a website is probably widely accepted as GTM hacks. I have been talking or considering it as GTM hacks. I don't know if there is a formal term around it, but the idea is to inject JavaScript codes through GTM's custom HTML tag that's available for anyone in GTM and utilize it for front-end modifications on your website, tweaking designs, making CSS changes, updates, or even fixing broken features on your website or hiding something that doesn't work. I have found myself in scenarios where brands were running extensive campaigns to acquire traffic, bring them to certain landing pages, only to discover that there was an issue with the landing page or it broke due to some different reasons, and you have to redirect that traffic to a different page. Typically, that redirection should be fairly straightforward when you're working with a good CMS system, but there could be challenges like caching, and it may take time to actually implement and redirect things that way through a CMS. Or if you want to hide some broken feature, a CTA or something that's broken, you simply don't want to take your users to a different journey or spoil their experience, you could simply hide those features as well through CSS modifications. And eventually you can even enable experimentation-based approach to these hacks so that you can test and learn what works for your brand before you even have to go through the complete code deployment release cycle for your website changes. So if you have some ideas or concepts that you would rather test before having your development team and design team come in and then implement it, only to find out that, hey, it doesn't bring significant conversion rate uplift through an A/B test, that's a lot of wasted money, and potentially you can get some ideas and sense whether it's working or not working before it's even too late and before it even goes into a development cycle. Now, as some of the previous speakers mentioned, GTM does require some technical know-how. You do need to have a strong understanding of how GTM works, not just tags, variables, and triggers, but also how a web page works. What does a typical page load process look like? You also need to understand how JavaScript works, and what are the limitations, how it should not be used, how it could be used, and so on. Because working with JavaScript in Google Tag Manager is essentially its backbone when it comes to customization, and especially when it comes to injecting front-end related hacks. To give an overview of how these hacks work, typically you need to also understand the page load process. This is a simplified version of a page load process. Basically, when you request a URL or a page, your request gets sent to a server. When your HTML is downloaded by your browser, the browser parses that HTML. It looks for all CSS and JavaScript code snippets and tries to execute it. When all CSS and JavaScript has been read and executed, or in the process of doing so, there's something called document object module, called DOM tree in short, and it's quite popularly known as creating your HTML elements of the page. When the DOM tree is created, only then you can actually see and interact with your elements and page interactions on your web page. So in order to effectively hack your page-related items and elements, you need to apply or work with GTM in a way that your JavaScript changes or hacks are added just at the right time in the DOM creation process, typically right at the moment when the DOM is ready. There are also performance considerations and things to consider where GTM is actually placed and how long other scripts may take to load. But for the purpose of this session, we will not dive deep into those other scenarios to give you an idea of what's possible with Google Tag Manager in terms of hacking. With that aside, let's look into a small demo where I have a quick web page of a dummy news website, which shows a dummy article about some fruits. If I were a traditional publication website or any other brand website, and at some point I realized that, hey, maybe just providing this content is not sufficient to our readers, and we may want to add some kind of a link to let them access a more detailed page or more more information about the content they're reading at this point. This idea would typically have to go through internal validations, your design team potentially on how this link should be placed and where it should be placed. Your development team would get involved, and eventually they will have to go through a sprint cycle if you have that in place. And the whole process could take at least a few days, if not weeks. With Google Tag Manager, I have already prepared a bunch of tags for the purpose of this demonstration, and hopefully these will work as well. So for the first one, Here in this one, I'm simply injecting a JavaScript-based link, a hyperlink on that page article to let users learn more about the content they are viewing. For this purpose, I will simply unpause this tag and publish the container. While this loads, it's really quick. It just took a moment to publish this change. And if I go back to my workspace for a moment, just to show what we really published, essentially this JavaScript was simply adding a dummy hyperlink with a text called Learn More About the Seasonal Fruits and adding that link into the DOM structure we discussed previously. As a result, when I go back to my website, I still don't see it because I need to refresh the page. When I reload the page, I now have a link added to my website, to my web page at the bottom. This link, we could link it theoretically to any place that we want. And I must say that such interventions should only be used as temporary measures. I typically like to use it for validation and A/B testing purposes, so I know what to request to the development team if I'm confused about a couple of different approaches to achieve the same objective or goal. So I would rather test it through GTM Hacks before getting my development team involved and having them consider this request for a proper implementation via a sprint cycle. Similarly, let's say if I later decided that, hey, maybe the link doesn't look good and it's not really prominent, what I might do is as I have done in the second demo here, is to simply convert it into a button. So I would simply unpause my tag here and save the second tag I have here as a hack and publish it as well. And while it publishes, okay, it was quick as well. And if we look into a few more details on what we just published, in addition to the previously injected link, we now actually created a button, a HTML button element that we will put next to that link, and we'll see it in a moment. And we are not simply adding a button through JavaScript itself. We are actually applying styles on that button, what color it should be, what should the radius, size, font, and so on. So you can actually control the look and feel of your website, but you do need to have some understanding of how JavaScript works for that. So after publishing hack number 2, if I reload the page, hopefully that will work as well. And yeah, I see I did something and there is a CTA, but the CTA is getting hidden behind the footer of this page. And this was not intended for the demo, but as I was creating these use cases, I thought that maybe I will also demonstrate issues like this that your users may face as well when visiting your websites, that there may be elements and you may need to fix these, and it will take some development effort again, and maybe a few hours or days to fix things like this. So what we could also do is, again, go back into Google Tag Manager, and this time we are not going to use a JavaScript. We are going to use a style element. Basically, Google Tag Manager, the script, custom HTML, tag type doesn't only take JavaScript, you can also implement CSS styles as part of it. So instead of a script, this time I'm simply adding some custom CSS styles as part of a style element here. And I am going to publish it. And hopefully that will resolve my scroll issue on the web page. So I can see the second CTA I added properly. So as it's getting published, Perfect. There was nothing fancy here, just basic CSS, essentially assigning height to 100%. If you have some knowledge on CSS, I highly recommend it. One of the key parts of working with JavaScript is to also know CSS, because you at some point you are expected to select certain elements on your web page, and that requires you to know some level of CSS. So I would definitely recommend that as well. And if I reload that page after adding that CSS fix, and I can actually scroll my page up, so I can see the CTA completely always visible. But there is one issue here, is that neither the link nor the CTA work at this point. As part of the final hack, we will actually put some functionality behind the CTA just to show that we can actually implement complex features as part of GTM hacks as well. Before that, one idea here could also be to A/B test with these two hacks or tags that we publish to see which of these two approaches, showing the CTA as a link or a button, would be better to take users to the next page or URL. So things like these could also be tested directly from Google Tag Manager in conjunction with your A/B testing tools like Firebase, for example. If you're looking into a free one, Firebase Remote Config is a good alternative for that. And for the final one, I wanted to actually implement a full feature through Google Tag Manager. And this one is a little complex, but again, doable through Google Tag Manager. Essentially, what it does is it leverages some APIs. You can actually call different APIs through Google Tag Manager, get the response, and do certain actions based on that response. So what we're going to do as part of the final hack here is I'm going to unpublish it. We'll discuss it in a bit. But I know AI is a hot topic right now. Everyone is talking about it. So I decided to add a feature through Google Tag Manager that extracts the key summary or insight about this article that we have on the page right now. To do that, I had to combine Google Tag Manager with Google Cloud. So it's going quite complex in a way, where you can call OpenAI APIs and create your own APIs in Google Cloud. You can even query BigQuery and do complicated stuff with that, and get the response from OpenAI that asks to summarize or find insights, whatever you want to do as part of your response. And that's what I have as part of hack number 4, where I have a prompt defined within my Google tag here, the Google Tag Manager script here, to get a key insight in less than 15 words by using all the content I have on the page. And hopefully this will work as well. So this is saved, and I will simply submit this, call it hack 4, publish. And now what happens is when this is published and when I load the web page, that script as part of the GTM hack will fetch all the content, call the API that we created from Google Cloud here, and we can have a separate session, or you can discuss how this could be incorporated in Google Tag Manager if you want after this session, and eventually get the results we want from the prompts we defined in Google Tag Manager. So if I simply reload the page, one good thing about it is we don't have to show or wait for a CTA or show a CTA that doesn't work. The way that hack was configured was only going to show the CTA when we received a response from the server and from the Google Cloud function. So we only show something when we have something to show. And when you click on it, you have a summary or a key insight for this news article in less than 15 words. Now, I could take this direction into several ways. And potentially, before discussing quickly on that, I would just like to see if that prompt really works. So I could try and change it to don't get me a key insight, get 3 key insights instead. And I will simply save it and update and submit it. And Hack 4 V2. Okay. And that's published through Google Tag Manager as well. And when I reload the page again, this time I hope I have 3 new insights. Let's see when the request is loaded from the Google Cloud function. It has been loaded, and I do have 3 insights from the same content I have on the web page. So 1, 2, 3, how you style and show these insights or utilize it as part of your website depends on your objectives. One interesting thing you could do with such AI level integration with Google Tag Manager is that you can enrich your data layers. For example, typically when sending data to Google Analytics, I could request through such APIs a sentiment analysis of the text that I have on the screen, and get it back as neutral, positive, or negative, for example, and push that details into the data layer. And that could enable me to send that information in tools like Google Analytics. So you could really extract entities and different kinds of attributes related to your use case and enrich your measurement capabilities through such AI level integration in Google Tag Manager in combination with Google Cloud. It's little complex to do, but not really difficult. And with that out of the way, I just quickly wanted to show you what kind of impact we have seen with such hack-based approaches. Would anyone want to guess what kind of change was made for one of our clients previously, where they had this initial version and they eventually saw 185% uplift in their conversion rate? The change requested, or the change that we had, was quite simple based on our hypothesis, and it was simply adding a sticky CTA on the header of the mobile experience, which would have taken them a long time to implement and have in place. But this was done within 30 minutes, and the impact you see as part of an A/B test is massive. And then you can decide, okay, this kind of direction works, so let's involve our dev team, maybe our design team, and then get them to actually deploy it as a proper feature. So following this approach of GTM hacks, you could potentially have a quicker iteration cycle and a more quicker path to see impact on your objectives. That's it from my side. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn by scanning this QR code or via Twitter on my name, Ritvik Sharma. And happy to answer any questions or continue any topics you want in the other room.
Thanks for that, Ritvik. Wow, there's some really interesting ideas there. I've not seen chat GPT or sort of sentiment analysis used in that way. And also I like the idea of obviously there's no kind of Google Optimize at the moment, so actually running a kind of like almost like an like actually adding the test and doing like a week on week comparison with like a more prominent button is really interesting. In essence, using GTM to do the injection of the button rather than optimize. So that's really interesting. I think on the subject of A/B testing, I'm just looking at comments. Someone asked A/B testing via GTM, how should you distribute users 50/50 or 80/20?
Yeah. So prior to Optimize Sunset, we were lucky to simply get that workload done by Optimize, and you had an optimized JavaScript to do that. Since the Optimize Sunset, we resorted to Firebase for web. Firebase for web has a feature called remote config for web. And through remote config for web, you can actually do something similar by sending your. You can actually split your audiences there through different percentage of users. So remote config for web is an alternative, and for now, it's a free alternative as well to do the split. And you can, similar to optimized JavaScript APIs, you can get the value of your audience bucket in Google Tag Manager as a JavaScript variable potentially, and use it for applying different applications on your website. So I would recommend to check out that alternative. You won't be able to execute A/B tests from it, but you will be able to split your audiences from there.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. I wasn't aware of that one. Yeah, I think we've in some cases used the random number in GTM, then divide by 10 or divide by 100, to sort of and then set as a cookie as like a bit of a crude kind of.
Correct. That was one of the considerations, but the only native limitation of GTM is that you don't get the control on selecting two things. Device, you have to inject a third-party JavaScript to tell you what device you are going to target on. And country, you have to again rely on a third-party API to decide what country you need to target the A/B test on. And for that reason, we tried to use Firebase remote config for web because it allows you to do these two things as well.
Yeah. So I've got a question saying, can you use, it says this as to create a selector ID as a trigger? I think that maybe there's a reference to one of the earlier slides 10 minutes ago. Well, I suppose anything that in JavaScript, the output could be set as a data layer event. So if that is the case, then that could be marked as a trigger to do something. Sorry for asking that one. I've got one question I had about the method for like ChatGPT, because I've seen a similar thing used for both on-site and off-site reviews. And so, for instance, there was an e-commerce site that had hosted reviews, and they weren't really monitoring where they had like a 1-star review on product pages, and obviously, surprise, surprise, people didn't click add to cart on those product pages. But the other problem they had was sometimes someone would give like a 5-star review, but then in the comment below they'd say, actually, it's like this bit's not good, but I like this one bit. So it kind of almost needs like the sentiment analysis and the actual review to sort of flag them. Is there with the ChatGPT, because when a user's visiting the site here, obviously it's doing an API request. Is there any way you could cache it so that it crawls the site once and almost like stores the cache in a database?
So in that case, I would recommend to use ChatGPT API or any kind of API for only key interactions on your website, not on every page load. And if the depends on your objective. If you simply want to parse through all your content on the website and store a specific result of your prompt, then you probably don't even need an API in Google Tag Manager. You probably want to do this exercise one time or every night in a dedicated server or someplace and store its result in your database. So I wouldn't recommend to cache it even on client side, but if you first, depending on your use case, if you did want to store the results, you can store it in local storage, for example, in the browser. But I think the possibilities are quite wide open, not just by using ChatGPT API, but by using Google Cloud function-based APIs, because you could eventually have your cloud function configured in a way that queries your BigQuery tables as well and get data of your existing customer in the current session about their previous website behavior. So if you pass as part of your API request the client ID to your Cloud Function API and get a previous purchase for that customer, you could potentially even do it cross-device if that person previously at some point had their ID mapped with a different device.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I think I would agree with the power of or importance of sending like a page ID, user ID, your J client ID, and even an add to cart ID. Sometimes like a site search ID, and then do the append server side.
yeah.
There's some really interesting and innovative suggestions there. Just there's one question, but it's a fairly broad kind of question about where do you learn to code or learn these techniques or hacks. What's your suggestion there?
I think it comes with practice. At some point, a few years ago, like 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't even know JavaScript at some point, and I had to pick it up. For me, it was because I knew Python. It was quite familiar. I could pick up the syntax and understand how things are working. But as I practiced more and implemented more hacks, I eventually got better at it. And for anyone who is trying to pick up JavaScript as a language, I would recommend them to explore the Grasshopper app by Google on their mobile devices that they can install. And it has quizzes and tasks based on JavaScript. That's quite useful. And also learn about CSS, especially about CSS selectors, how those work. Because combining CSS selectors with JavaScript is where the magic happens when you implement GTM hacks.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. You kind of need to know, but